Like Purdue, it's just an example. Purdue losing to Fresno State is okay. We still win the Big Ten West. But me,
Billy Napier gets fired. I'm just kidding.
hey, really the best time of the year. I will be seated watching the Red Zone for 7 hours on Sunday. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Backyard Banter. Tanner, James, Johnny. Today we're going to be joined by a very special guest, Notre Dame legend Pat Terrell.
Yeah, super excited to sit down with the Notre Dame legend. Obviously, big Notre Dame fan over here. I think Tanner might be able to be okay with this guest as a Purdue fan. But yeah, super excited. He's got huge plays. Going to talk to him about his legacy at Notre Dame, Coach Holtz, and all that. But super excited.
Yeah, and also big NFL career for him. Played for the Rams, drafted by the Rams. Played for the Panthers in their inaugural season. Had a good career. Played for the Packers, unfortunately, but be exciting to talk to him. I can't wait.
Yeah, being from St. Pete, Pat Terrell's from the St. Pete area, went to Lakewood. Just can't wait for the conversation. Without further ado, our conversation with Pat Terrell. Like we said, we're now joined by Notre Dame legend Pat Terrell. Mr. Terrell, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Jonathan. Couldn't be better.
Thank you for coming on.
Well, look, it's a pleasure. I didn't realize we were so close. I guess we could have did this live.
Yeah, maybe
we're just right down the street from each other. But
maybe if we have another one, we could do it in person.
there you go. And
So,
congratulations, you guys.
Yeah.
So, you can ask him. Oh no, I want to get into the high school days. So first of all, what was like your dream school, maybe favorite school growing up?
Oh
And
my goodness.
like, what was the recruiting process like for you?
Well, you know what? I'll even go back before high school because this is where Jonathan's mom and the rest of his uncles and aunts come into play. I grew up right down the street from the Crespos.
Yep.
And Artie was my best friend in the world. We were like the Little Rascals. I remember so much about my childhood, and it was an awesome childhood I had growing up. And I think my kids miss out on how much fun your mom and your uncles used to have because we had a blast. And it's crazy because it was a long time ago. But I remember, let's see here, there was Artie, Lisette, Peppo, and Anna. Am I right?
Yep.
There you go. And the dog, Surprise.
Yep. Can't believe you remember the dog.
Now your mom's gonna get mad at me for saying this, but that was the nastiest slobbery dog I've ever seen in my life. But I used to have drool and it would never break off. But it was the sweet dog. We were like I'll tell you, we were like the Little Rascals, and that dog would we tackle that dog and do all kind of stuff. But we had a great childhood. And so to answer your question, Tanner, growing up, golly, I remember crazy stuff about my friendship with your mom and your family. I remember Artie was a huge Miami Dolphin fan.
Really?
Yeah, because the kicker, I think he loved the kicker. Oh gosh, what is the kicker's name? Your Premium, I believe it was. I'm probably destroying his name, but Artie was my first friend that really introduced me to sports.
Oh wow!
I mean,
I'll tell him that he's gonna take all the credit for.
Yeah, I mean, he knew he loved the Miami Dolphins, and I only knew there was like 2 or 3 teams in the world. I thought it was the Miami Dolphins, the Buccaneers, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I remember the only reason I knew about the Miami Dolphins was because of Artie. But yeah, it was a neat childhood. Mr. Crespo and Mrs. Crespo, Mr. Crespo, this would be your grandfather, right?
Yep.
He was a wonderful, wonderful man, and he was a doctor. And I remember everybody in the neighborhood, after our tackle football games, anybody that would break something, instead of going to the emergency room, they would head down to Dr. Crespo's house, and he'd fix it or say, head down to the hospital. I'll see you there. But it was a fun family. I remember he would come home from work and he would have his red glass of wine ready on the kitchen counter from your grandma. And they would start talking. And I didn't know what in the world they were saying.
Yeah, they're all in Spanish.
And then Artie and Lisette would answer them back. And and Spanish, and I didn't know what they were saying, and I didn't know for years if he liked me or hated me, but I know he loved me, and because he let us play all the time, and so it was a fun childhood. But Tanner, I went to Lakewood High School, and which was a public high school, because I went to Canterbury, which was a private middle school, and that school was actually at Eckerd College. It was so small, and I think our graduating class was about 18 students.
Wow.
And so I never played organized football because my mom always was too scared to let me play. So my only football experience was beating up on Artie and Peppo and Lissette. So I knew I was good, but I didn't know how good my competition was. You know what I mean? And so when I got ready to go to high school, I wanted to go somewhere where sports was a little bigger deal. And I think your mom went to St. Pete Catholic, if I'm correct.
Yeah, she
went.
was.
So we looked at that, but we decided on Lakewood. And man, I tell you, we played baseball together with Artie for years, and then like I said, we used to play Kill the Carrier. I called it a couple different names. I guess now you can't call it what we used to call it because it's politically incorrect. So you had to be an athlete in our group. You had to be a daredevil as far as jumping ramps on our bicycles and so, like I said, I just can't say enough about my childhood and with your family, the Crespos. But went to Lakewood, and so as far as what colleges I really loved, Tanner, growing up, the Florida Gators were huge. Our other friends, the Fazios, that lived across the street from Lissette and Artie, I know they had a big family, and they went to Florida, University of Florida. So I kind of became a fan of the Gators just because hanging out with their family, and they talk about it all the time. And then as I got older, when I got to high school, I mean, for crying out loud, I mean, the Miami Hurricanes were
the U.
They were the it, right? The U. And I remember in high school, Jimmy Johnson came to visit in my cafeteria, and everyone just was freaking out. And I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. And he came to see me, and at the time, Miami, Florida State, University of Florida, they were like in the top 5.
Yeah.
And so if Florida State, Miami, or the University of Florida was recruiting you, it was like a whirlwind of other schools. And so it really was a snowball effect. I mean, I think I went to one game, and Georgia Tech was there, and when he looked up and saw reps from Miami and Florida and Florida State, the word kind of spreads. And so it just kind of snowballed, and so it got pretty chaotic and crazy, but it was also a pretty big surprise. I was good, I was fast, and but I owe a lot to my older brother Grady, who's was really close with Artie, still is, and my older brother Grady was kind of like my agent when I was in high school. He's 1 year older than me, and this is before NIL or before all this crazy stuff that's happening now. But he would tell me and help me to write letters and to get some interest out there. And then, like I said, when a couple of the big schools started showing up, Florida was such a popular state for athletes that everyone kind of jumped on the bandwagon. So really, Notre Dame didn't come in the picture. That's where I ended up going and graduating from. But I can tell you a little bit more about that later.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the nice words about my family. I know my family still adores you to this day. Talks about you all the time. And my mom loves to talk about how she used to beat you down and playing flag football.
Oh my God!
I guess tackle football.
Okay, I know this is a sports podcast. I'm going to start talking about your mom. Your mom is so awesome. She's a beautiful lady. I didn't know she was a girl until I was probably like 11 years old. She was like a tomboy, right? Yeah. And she would hang with us, and it was so much fun. But I remember one story. She probably doesn't remember this, but she loved the movie Grease Lightning with John Travolta.
Okay.
And I remember it must have been raining because we were never inside. We were always outside, but it was raining or something. And we ended up me and all the guys and the gals, we ended up in her room playing Grease.
Yeah.
And she gave us all parts, and
Yep.
I hadn't seen the movie yet.
Right.
I don't know why it still sticks in my head.
Yeah,
Said I didn't have fun, but I think, and I kept getting yelled at by the director, which was your mom, and I knew what I was doing wrong because I hadn't seen the movie.
yeah.
So one day she'll have to tell me what part she gave me because I did see the movie.
No,
and I didn't see a lot of people that look like me in that movie, but
yeah.
that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
That sounds just like her. But getting back to the high school, you kind of talked about NIL. How do you think, if you were still in high school, how NIL would have affected you kind of as a big time recruit?
Wow. Well, I'm not a hater. It would have been kind of nice. It would have been kind of fun. I mean, the money and these contracts these guys are getting, I think it was long overdue as far as letting these players get compensated. I believe the rollout was probably a little faster than it should have been.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they were taking advantage of the collegiate athletes for so long. When they finally got caught or wanted to make the change, instead of kind of doing it in a systematic way, they just ripped the Band-Aid off and said, it's the wild, wild west. And so I think they need to get it under control. But for crying out loud, I mean, I remember being in college, winning a national championship, and we just, my team will always say, because we won so many games, we were a big deal for the NBC contract, and we had players that didn't come from a lot of money, and you see guys, you see their jerseys in the bookstore and the lines and this and that, and we'd be on national television, and the game is over, and they give us like a cold little bologna sandwich and an apple, a bag of chips, and an orange juice after the game, and it's like, wow.
Right.
That's crazy.
And there were so many restrictive rules back then. You couldn't have a job, right? Because you can't work during the season. And so, how do you get money? And so I think it's come a long way since I was in school. But the way I feel about it now, I think it'll be a little bit more organized. And to answer your question, how it would have affected me, I probably wouldn't have done well with it. And I think one of the things I'm concerned about the collegiate athletes right now is I played for the famous Lou Holtz.
Mm-hmm.
And Lou Holtz had once coached for Woody Hayes, and we all know that story. Yeah. And so Lou Holtz was intense. I mean, he was a ball breaker. But that made me the man I am today. And, so if it wasn't for fighting through adversity when he would, roll us out of practice or say things to me that made me want to quit, but I had to stick it through or stick it out, my resolve is so much stronger. And I get worried now, you college kids, you get yelled at. And if you're a collegiate athlete, you can always threaten to go to the portal, right? And so, I'm concerned about that, but it's a different world. So I'm not holding on to the past. Yeah. I just think that hopefully the right people will make the right decisions to get that NIL and all this stuff under control, because these guys are making, guys and gals, are making a lot of money in college, and it's going to influence. And I think the bigger schools are going to have a huge advantage in the upcoming years here.
Yeah, you talked about Coach Holtz there for a second, and I got to transition into something that I've seen a video you talk about. You said it was one of the down points of your career, but talk to us about that 87 Cotton Bowl practice.
Holy smokes.
Just because when I watched the video, I just showed Johnny the video, we were dying laughing. It's one of the funniest things I've seen. And I didn't know that side of the story, obviously, until I watched the video. But share with us that 87 Cotton Bowl practice and where your mind was at there, and if you've recovered from what Coach Holtz said.
Well, after graduating from Lakewood, I'll tell you guys if you're interested, after this story, why I chose Notre Dame. But I'm up in South Bend. It's my sophomore year. And a lot of people didn't know, but I was a starting wide receiver opposite of Timmy Brown. And Tim Brown had won the Heisman Trophy that season. So, me being from Florida, I was pretty arrogant, and I'm like, okay, yeah, Tim's pretty good. He got that Heisman. wait till they get a load of me when Tim is gone, right? And so, but unfortunately, as a wide receiver, the most important statistics are, yards per catch, how many touchdowns, your yak, yards after catch, all that stuff. And we're going into the Cotton Bowl my sophomore season, and I had extremely embarrassing statistics. I had oh my God, 7 catches for a few yards, no TDs, and I was basically the opposite receiver of the Heisman Trophy winner running. Well, here's a quick story. I think I said that one before, but one of my best friends in college, he was a big practical joker, and he taped on the back of my jersey, my practice jersey, D period COY. I didn't see it, And so I run out to practice, and I thought somebody just did a joke and put a tape on my back or something, but they were all laughing at me because it said D period decoy. Because that's all I do, I just run decoy routes so Timmy Brown could get open. And so the story on how I got switched to defensive back really evolved that day at the Cotton Bowl, at practice prior to the Cotton Bowl. So our practices were very intense, and I remember my parents had driven all the way from St. Pete, Florida, all the way to Texas, to Dallas, and they got there a couple days early so they can come and watch the open practice, and that's Notre Dame. So it was 3,000-4,000 people in the stands, and practices were very intense, and they called the route, and it was a route where I had to go 18 yards, and it was like a dig route across the middle, and I'm wide open, and Tony Rice throws this beautiful pass, and I didn't tell you one little detail. I had a few drops that season. But the ball hits me in the chest, and I drop it. And Lou Holtz used to stand in the secondary. So I'm like, oh, gosh, Coach, I'm saying to myself, don't embarrass me. I'd seen him do some Woody Hayes type stuff. And so he just started yelling. He turned purple. He ran right toward me. I thought he was going to jump on me. And he just goes right past me. And he goes through the linebackers, through the line. And he runs right up to Tony Rice, who's still one of my best friends right now. And he's going off on Tony. And Tony's like looking at me like, come on, Pat, catch the ball, So I'm feeling bad. But I'm like, at least he's not yelling at me. And Lou Holtz goes, this is my bad interpretation of Lou Holtz, but he's like, Tony Rice, I tell you, that's your fault, Tony Rice. I don't care if Pat Terrell is so open, you could walk up and hand him the football. Take the sack. Do not throw the football to Pat Terrell.
It's so awesome.
He's like, you got Timmy Brown over here, Pat Terrell right here. Take the sack if Timmy's covered. And I was so mad. I'm like, and thank God my dad always told me you're not going to quit anything you start, but that was one time I was going to not obey him. And so I'm walking off the field, and I'm embarrassed, and he calls practice. He's like, everybody just take it in. And out of the corner of my eye, I see him kind of walking up to me, and I'm like, okay, good. I deserve an apology from him, Wishful thinking, because he comes up to me, he puts his arm around me, and he goes, Pat Terrell, let me tell you, son, you're the best receiver I've ever coached. Until we throw you the damn football. I'm moving you to free safety in the spring. And so that's what happened. I ended up, starting that last game in the Cotton Bowl. We lost. And that was the last bowl game I ever lost. And then going into the spring, I was just a disgruntled, pissed off former wide receiver. And I was just taking it out on all my teammates. And I gained a lot of friends on defense. And the next thing you know, I'm in the rotation. So so that worked out good for me. That's but awesome. If it was a transfer portal, I would have been in it.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, that's awesome. You talked about you want to tell a story about coming to Notre Dame, but I just want to preface it for the people that don't know. The town in Florida, especially in football, is second to none. And Miami was kind of known at the time, and Florida and State for putting a bracket around the state, not letting the elite players leave. So kind of go into why you chose Notre Dame over, Miami, FSU, and Florida.
Yeah, it was you're 18 years old and you're getting recruited, and you got these, famous coaches, Bobby Bowden and Jimmy Johnson and all these coaches, and they're coming to you and meeting you at school. They're coming in your living room, and you're trying to be cool, but you're like still a fan. And so and especially in Florida, it's a tough place when you're a highly recruited to leave the state. It's like blasphemy. I mean, how dare you not pick one of the three? And so, I took visits to all three of those schools, and this little skinny coach with glasses was so intense. And this is Lou Holtz. And at the time, Lou Holtz was coaching for Minnesota. And so he was such a good recruiter. He just basically, it's recruiting. He just said everything I wanted to hear, And but I remember he convinced me to take one of my visits to the University of Minnesota. I knew I wasn't going to go to Minnesota. But I've never been there. It sounds pretty cool. This whole coaching staff is really cool. They really want me pretty bad. And I like this Lou Holtz guy. And so I figured, hey, it's a free trip. I get to go to, the Twin Cities. I've never been up there. I'd never really seen snow before. Yeah. And so they flew me out there. And I just remember they were really super cool. And I didn't know this, obviously, but Lou Holtz had an out in his contract that said he could break his contract if one university offers him a job, and that was Notre Dame. And so it was over the winter. They had just won a bowl game, I believe, and so Lou Holtz, he kept saying stuff like, next to Notre Dame, there's not a finer university in the country. It's almost as good as Notre Dame. And then I go back home. It's over Christmas break, and next thing I know, I'm watching ESPN, and Lou Holtz signs, with the Fighting Irish. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I get a phone call, and it's from Lou Holtz, and he's like, please tell me you're getting recruited by Notre Dame, because it was part of the protocol. You can't really take your recruits with you at the time. You can do anything now, but and I said, yeah, I am, but I didn't. Notre Dame had just gotten blown away by Miami, and down there in the Orange Bowl. Like, golly, it was embarrassing. And I was a Miami fan, so he's like, you gotta take a look at it. And so I remember it goes back to the neighborhood again. Walking around and the Fazios, I was telling you, that's the family that lived across the street from your grandfather, and he was also a doctor. And I remember they got kind of interested in my recruiting because they'd see my name in the paper, and they're like, hey, Pat, have you narrowed it down? And I remember vividly people that I looked up to, their parents. I'd list the schools off, and when I'd say Notre Dame, it was always like, whoa, that's pretty cool. Yeah. And even though Florida was cool and Miami was cool, and my buddies all loved Miami and Florida, but I remember the reaction from the parents, and I liked that. I kind of liked that. And then, and I'll tell you what, I mean, I haven't told the story on media before, but the real reason I chose Notre Dame was probably my father. And my dad made me do a little assignment. He said, okay, Pat, I'm really proud of you. And you're going on these visits, and all these schools you're looking at are very, good academic schools, and, obviously great football programs. He said, but I want you to do something. He goes, I want you to do two things, and you guys are too young for this. We didn't have Google back in the day, so this assignment was kind of hard. He goes, I want you to find out the graduation rate of the black athletes at these schools you're looking at. And also, I want you to research the tuition. And I'm like, I thought all colleges were the same. Yeah. And so when it came down to it, I figured I'd just, ask my pops, hey, where should I go? And I did that. And he said, son, you're 18 now, and, you're becoming a man, and you're going to have to start making some of these decisions on your own. so you're gonna have to decide. He said, but did you do what I asked? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, okay, well, I remember he said, like, what about Florida? I said, yeah, I mean, no, I said, I like Florida. He goes, okay, what's the graduation rate? And I told him. And then he said, what's the tuition? And I remember, I may screw up these numbers, but I remember it was like $3,000. And he wrote down on his pad, he goes, 3,000 times 4. That's $12,000. He goes, and he stood up and he extended his hand. He goes, I'm really proud of you. You earned $12,000 for in-state tuition. You guys are probably saying, oh, that doesn't even cover my meal plan.
Right.
Anyway,
Literally.
he goes, I'm excited for you. He goes, that's fantastic. And he goes, what about Notre Dame? And he knew. I never knew he was a huge Notre Dame fan until later on. And at the time, it was like, I don't know, $25,000. And he goes, 25 times 4, it's 100,000. And he goes, they're paying you with the education. So my dad kind of knew about the NIL before it even happened.
He started
30 years ago. And so I remember I looked at that and I was like, wow, I didn't know it was such a big difference in tuition. And he goes, still your decision.
Yeah.
But you can get paid this much for your education, or you can get paid this much for your education. And so when I took my trip to Notre Dame, and it wasn't the most fun. I had a blast at my other trips, I'll tell you. I can't even tell you on this podcast.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. And I remember Notre Dame wasn't my favorite visit, but I remember the tradition was amazing. And I really said to myself, you know what? It's only 4 years. It's going to be cold. Oh, here's my Purdue story.
Yeah, here we go.
One of my trips, believe it or not, was to Purdue. And when I was on my trip to Notre Dame, Coach Holtz called me in his office and he asked me, he goes, can I get a commitment from you? I want to sign you right now. And I was prepared for that. I was like, well, Coach, I'm going to go home and talk it over with my parents. And he goes, well, at least tell me, what are your top 3 schools, And I said, well, who am I competing against? And I said, well, Miami, I love the Canes and here and Purdue. And he goes, Purdue? Don't take this wrong. He goes, what the hell am I competing against Purdue for? And I go, well, Coach, I said, I love aviation. Purdue has one of the best aerospace engineering colleges, and all the astronauts went to school there, and I love planes. And he goes, son, let me tell you, we've got Mishawaka South Bend Regional Airport right down the street. And you can do everything here you did at Purdue, which is not true.
Yeah.
But this is part of recruiting, right? Tell the recruit what they want to hear.
That's
and
awesome.
So that was my Purdue story. Not long, not.
That's great. That's great.
So so I ended up choosing to go to Notre Dame, and I look back, and for me personally, it was the best decision I could have made. We won. I still say 2 national championships because we were ripped off my senior year, like Florida State was. 2 national championships, and made some wonderful friends, and it's a great university, and I still go back quite a bit, and so it worked out pretty good for me.
That's great. Yeah.
So did you want to ask him about the play?
Yeah, I guess we can. Obviously, you look up your name. There's one big play that comes up, and it's that game against Miami. Obviously, it's that transition year where you became, you were on the defense now instead of offense, and just talk us through that play against Miami. Late game, they're going for 2. Like, what is your mind thinking at that moment? Like, what happened there? If you could just talk us through the play. And
incomplete.
No, I can't really remember. I'm just playing.
Yeah. All right.
No, it was it was my first year starting. It was only my second start.
Yeah.
And so but I was so fired up. It was I don't like saying Catholics versus convicts because
That's a big.
because not everybody on Notre Dame was Catholic.
Ooh, there we go.
That's
Breaking news. Breaking news.
but no, I don't like that. But because I knew a lot of the guys that I played with, and those guys at Miami are, there was a lot of good guys, and and we didn't have a bunch of choir boys in our team, so we didn't call somebody convicts. So and plus none of the players were down with that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it was a huge game, and we didn't like each other, and me being from Florida even added extra fuel, and and it was so intense. My older brother Grady, he's you could take him out of Florida, but you never take the Florida out of Grady. So he's a huge Miami Hurricane fan, and so were all my buddies in high school, and so they were rooting for me to personally do good, but they wanted us to get crushed. But yeah, it was still today, after 10 years in the NFL, I still look back, and that was one of the most intense games I've ever played in. And believe it or not, I remember when I was drafted by the LA Rams, next to me was Cleveland Gary, who was a huge part of that game. And they want to make up controversial stuff like he didn't fumble, and we won't get into that. Yeah. But he was next to me. Robert Bailey was next to me. Frank Stams was one of my teammates at Notre Dame. We had on that Rams team, I think it was like 11 guys that played in that game.
Wow.
So even though we're in the pros, so there was so much trash talking, still bitterness about that game, and it was a lot of fun. But it was a huge game, and every play was so important. They had an amazing team. We had an amazing team. We were confident. So I mean, Miami respected us, but they didn't really respect anybody at the time. We weren't overachievers because we proved that we were a great team. We went on and kicked tail. I think we beat, oh my gosh, like 6 top 10 teams that year, and ended up playing USC was number 1 against number 2 for the last game of the season, and then we beat West Virginia in the Fiesta Bowl. So it was a unanimous national championship. But that game was really the moment when we showed the country that Notre Dame was back, and we were legit. And as ironic enough as this is, that last play of the game, that 2-point conversion you're talking about, where back at the time they didn't have overtime, and so you either tie or go for the win, and we knew Jimmy Johnson was going to go for the win. We knew it. And the most ironic thing about that play is when we lined up, we had practiced a lot, so we had an idea of what they like to run in intense situations like that, but you still don't know. And they were so good. And but I line up and I look up and I see Leonard Conley. And Leonard Conley and we played against each other all through high school. And you were talking about the talent out of St. Pete. Yeah, so Leonard Conley, he was number 28, and he was lined up, and it was kind of like a little flashback. I'm like, oh, here we go again. I think he went to Largo, I believe. His Lakewood against Largo all over again, And so he ran the route, and as my teammates still say today, I should have caught it.
That's exactly
what Johnny asked.
We were watching the play. Obviously, the play my uncle and mom talk about all the time. But we were watching.
So I knocked the ball down, and it was it was fun personally, obviously. But when you're playing a game that's so intense and it's back and forth, it was just a relief. It was a dagger in the throat that we had just beat, the great Miami Hurricanes in a fought out battle. So I didn't really realize how big that play was. I mean, I knew, the game is over, but how famous it would get until obviously later on. And crazy enough, I kind of didn't like having that attention about that one play when I was in the NFL, because I thought I had a pretty good career at Notre Dame, and the only thing people would talk about was that one play. And I'd always say, hey, I had a pick 6 that game, and I had like 8 tackles.
Yeah.
But the older I get, I love to play, right? I mean, but at the time, it was like I was the one-trick pony. And but it's fun. Obviously my kids, they make fun of me and saying that I should have caught the ball and this and that. But it's also kind of funny when I go home after we win the national championship and you go to the barber. I don't have to do that anymore. And I go to the barber shop and all my buddies are in there and I'm kind of, thinking, hey, I'm going to, I'm the man a little bit, right? Oh my gosh. People were like, dude, you cost me money. And so I didn't get a good reception when I came back to Florida after that Miami Notre Dame game, but it was fun. And still even today on social media, both teams, we still all stay in touch with each other, still talk a lot of trash.
That's great.
And it was some great guys, great players on both sides of the ball, and it was real special to be a part of Notre Dame history. I go back up to campus quite a bit, and to be named, amongst so many great players at the university, and so to leave a tiny little mark is pretty cool, and so it was a great experience.
Yeah, that's great.
And all my family was there, and it was really, really kind of cool. So awesome. Everybody was there, and that was fun. Quick story: my brother Grady, I think he at the time he was at the Miami game, and he sold his tickets for like $500. And back in 1988, that's like $3,000, right? If you do the math. And I'm like, did you see the game? He goes, oh yeah, I just gave the usher $20 and got it in the side.
That's awesome. That's great.
That's awesome. Talk about getting drafted by the Rams a little bit, and then I also had kind of another question. What was it like to play for the Panthers in their inaugural season as a franchise?
Well, sure. One thing I didn't mention, and you guys know this because you're in Illinois right now, is when I got drafted by the LA Rams, you couldn't have found a more exciting camper.
Sure.
This weather, you look out the window right now, right?
I'll tell you
We're
what.
preparing for a blizzard for tomorrow.
Being from Florida.
Yeah, and I'm from Florida. I'm like, oh my gosh, what in the world? I didn't know I thought it was against the law to play football in weather. And then I end up in Green Bay also. So
yeah.
But so I had an idea. I remember when I was and my whole family was thrilled. I was not surprised. I knew I was good. I knew I was going to get drafted. But remember, I didn't play free safety until my junior season. So when I got moved, I was a little disgruntled because I thought that would really damage any future of pro football. But I was very blessed in that I got in there and it just became natural to me. And like I said, I was a disgruntled wide receiver, so I hated everybody and I just used to hit anything that moved, my team and theirs. And then I learned how to start opening my eyes when I made tackles, and that worked out better. But so it happened real fast, and so quickly I kind of went up the ranks, and the next thing you know, I'm projected as a first round draft pick, and which was pretty exciting, and because that junior year went by so fast. And like I said, I was part of a great team. I made a lot of plays, and just being a part of a great team really enhances everything. And so, wow, when I got drafted by the Rams, I was a pretty excited camper, man. You're in South Bend for 4 years, and all of a sudden, I remember my agent was from California, so right before the draft, I went to visit my agent in LA in Orange County, and actually I stayed with Junior, the late Junior Seau, and so we both had the same agent. We were friends, even though he went to USC and I went to Notre Dame. We were huge rivals on the field, but good friends off the field. And so I stayed with him, and he took me around Southern Cal, and I'm like, oh, this place is heaven, man. This is fantastic. Yeah. So I go home. I was going to go to the draft in New York, but that was the year that it was the first time they let juniors come out early. Because before, you had to be a senior to get drafted in the NFL. And so my luck, I'm projected to go first round, and then I believe, it was like 14 juniors went in the first round that year. And so that knocked me to the second round. But I was still thrilled. I mean,
Yeah.
second round draft pick going to the LA Rams. And I was, so I was there. A week later, I'm going back there permanently. And so I was like, wow, this is really cool. And it was neat because the year before they drafted Frank Stamms with their top pick. He was a linebacker on my Notre Dame championship team. Then my year they drafted me. Then the next year they drafted Todd Light. I think he was the fourth pick in the draft. He was in my secondary at Notre Dame. And then the next year they drafted Jerome Bettis. So it was like Notre Dame, Notre Dame, Notre Dame, Notre Dame. And so it was fun. We were all out there together. And unfortunately, we didn't win a lot of games when I was out there. Went through a couple different coaches. And then the Panthers was our expansion team. And next thing you know, after my contract was up, I played 4 years with the Rams, and then I signed as a free agent contract with the New York Jets because Ronnie Lott was out there, and I was a big fan of Ronnie Lott, and I just thought it'd be a thrill, being a safety with Ronnie Lott on one side, and Pete Carroll was a new coach there, and Pete Carroll had recruited me in high school when he was at UCLA, and so we've always had a pretty good relationship, and so, yeah, I signed a really nice deal to go out to New York. Went out to New York, and then all of a sudden, Pete Carroll got fired after my first year in New York, and that's when he went to New England, I think. And then the Panthers were in existence, and they had their mock draft where they didn't want the same thing to happen to the Buccaneers.
Yep, they lost.
And the Seahawks, to take 4 or 5 years to win. So what they did was they were able to choose players from any team. You could only protect one player. And so the next thing I know, I'm on my way to Carolina, which was exciting. But remember now, I just played 4 years in LA, had a great time, didn't win a lot of games. And then, in New York, had a great time, but didn't win a lot of games. And now I'm going to an expansion team. I'm like, I'm used to winning in college, even in high school. And I get to Carolina, and it was a thrill. I mean, it was so cool because we were a brand new team. I know the Jaguars went young with their picks, whereas the Panthers wanted a little more experience. And so, man, it was a locker room full of veterans. We all knew each other because we had been playing against each other for years. Sam Mills and Anthony Johnson and Mark Carrier from the Bucks, and just a lot of great athletes and good guys. And boy, we just kicked tail. And I mean, won a lot of games in Carolina. And it was fun being a part of a city with a brand new NFL team. And it was fun. It was really nice. And Charlotte's a great city. My brother lives there now still. And I loved it. Loved being in Carolina. Yeah. And then finally, I'm looking for a Super Bowl. We played in the NFC Championship game, and then my contract was up, and the Green Bay Packers came looking, and I said, "Let's do it." And so that's why I ended up in Green Bay my last season and retired from the Packers. But yeah, I really have I still stay in touch with a lot of the management and ownership with Carolina and the Rams. So. Had a fun career, played a lot longer than I ever imagined. And, it was back in the day. And now my kids, their hobby is to get on YouTube and find plays where I'm like getting toasted up or something. I don't get that, but they think it's hilarious.
But
that's great. That's great. That's awesome.
Obviously, you played against just some unreal talent at Notre Dame and in the league. If you could somehow just pinpoint one player that was like, wow, he was just kind of different, kind of like the best player that you ever went up against.
Yeah, I mean, I've really played against some great players. I mean, I started on every team, and so I've seen all the guys, and and it takes you about 4 or 5 years in the league until you're not like awestruck. I remember my first start was against the 49ers.
Oh, yeah.
You line up at free safety, and you got Joe Montana behind the center, and then Jerry Rice to the left, and you got John Taylor to the right, and you got Brent Jones at tight end and Roger Craig in the backfield, and you're like, oh, snap, And I remember it was my first snap. It was my first start, And Joe Montana was doing like the Patrick Mahomes thing before Patrick Mahomes, obviously. And he'd look left like Magic Johnson and throw to the right, or look right and throw to the left. He would really mess with the safety a lot with his eyes. And I remember he was looking left and threw right, and I guessed wrong because I was going to just jump it. I was very aggressive, and as soon as I saw him look, I just jumped the wrong way, which I thought, but it happened to be the right way, and I picked him off.
Awesome.
And we ended up beating the 49ers, one of the few times we beat the Niners there in San Francisco. And, so I made a mistake, but I got a pick. So obviously I was acting like I was the man. I'm jumping around, doing my little dance. And so we win. After the game, Joe Montana runs up to me, and I'm like, I was pretty impressed at the time they even knew my name. He's like, "Hey, Pat." And I was like, "Yeah, Joe." And he goes, "Let me ask you a question." He goes, he's such a competitor. He goes, like, what did you see? How'd you pick that ball off? And I said, "Oh, Joe, I've been studying you for years." And then I remember he looked at me, he goes, "Because you're a Notre Dame guy, I'll give you that one, but you'll never pick me off again." And so we still laugh about that. But to answer your question, great players, man, as far as quarterbacks, Dan Marino had a rocket ship. I mean, he could just shoot a ball anywhere he wanted. And, Joe Montana, I just kind of told you how incredible he was. As far as wide receivers, Jerry Rice was the man. But, you had a lot of respect for him because, he'd run if it's a run, he'd run the routes the same way. If it's a pass, he'd run it the same way. In the fourth quarter, he's wearing guys down because now your eyes are back inside, like, oh, he's not getting it. But boom, he explodes. So you got, he can make all the catches. The guy I tell my kids, the only receiver that ever scared me, ever, and I've never been scared on the football field, was Randy Moss.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
And I just, when they call him a freak, I know after I played him, and I played him my rookie year, and the guy is like 6'5", and he runs a 4.2 40. So that doesn't match up.
No.
I mean, who's the guy in Miami? You're used to seeing, the small guys that.
There you go.
Yeah, Tyreek Hill. You look at him, you're like, yeah, this guy's. Let me back my cushion up a little bit. But you see a guy that's like a giraffe, you don't think of him as being quick. And he doesn't look like he's moving fast. But when you look, even if you look at his highlights, instead of Tyreek Hill's, each one of his steps is like 2.5 yards. Each one of Randy Moss's steps is like 4 yards. So it doesn't look like he's quick, but he's closing cushions like that. And I'd never seen anybody that could play with the ball while it was in the air. And the reason I say play with the ball is, on a deep pass, you're trained as a defensive back, get in position, look back for the ball, right? You've been coached that your whole career. Well, if you do that, you're toast, because that's where the word getting moss came from, You get in position and look at the ball, you feel the receiver, right?
Yeah.
He'll slow down while the ball's in the air. And everything is telling you, why aren't we running full speed? But he's slowing down, so you naturally slow down too. And as soon as you slow down, he accelerates, touchdown.
Crazy.
I'd never seen anything like that in my career. And so, I mean, the guy, he could really do some incredible things, and had a lot of respect for his game.
Yeah.
I played some great receivers, played against a lot of great receivers, but I'm gonna get you, and the more famous you are, the harder I want to hit you. But Randy Moss was a guy that I really gave the utmost respect to, and thought he was really the most incredible receiver I've ever played against.
That's awesome. That makes a lot of sense. That does make sense for the one guy to have scared you. I think we all would be so scared going up against the guy. Oh, that's great. That's great. So you talked about that last year in Green Bay. Just looking at the map of the 4 teams you were at, I mean, you were everywhere. I mean, you were far East Coast, far West Coast. You went north, then you went back south. Like, what was your one team? Was it the Rams? Was your favorite team because they drafted you?
No, I think when I look, I really felt close with the Panthers. I mean, the Rams was fun. I had my teammates out there, the beaches, the palm trees. But at a certain point, when you start getting long in the tooth, you want some championships. And the Panthers it was really cool because, like I mentioned earlier, we had a lot of seasoned veterans. So even though we were having a great time, we were focused. We had a great coaching staff. Dom Capers was our coach, and management was fantastic, and the community just really took us in. I got a funny Panther story. Do we have time for it?
Of course. Yeah.
So we're a brand new NFL team in a brand new city that's not a brand new city, but a city that's never had an NFL team. So, the celebrity thing was pretty high. You go out and people, would know you and this and that. And I remember I could always go out to dinner with my wife and not be bothered. Charlotte is a NASCAR city. NASCAR is everything. And one year the NFL Players Association sponsored one of Kyle Petty's cars. So we had stickers on his car. And so there's a show called Inside NASCAR. And so they asked me, Sam Mills, and a couple other players on the Panthers to come out and be the guest on Inside NASCAR to work with the pit crew. And so I'll do it. It'll be fun. It's my day off. I go out and they film us. They wanted to do a challenge. Could the pit crew for Kyle Petty beat the Panthers at changing a tire?
Yeah.
So they timed us, and it took us like 5 minutes. I mean, I think we had to cut the commercial break, and they came back and we're so we get it on. These guys, they do it in like 15 seconds. It was crazy. No big deal, right? Tuesday, my day off. The show airs on Wednesday night, I believe. I remember Thursday, I went out to dinner, and there must have been 20 people that came up to me and were like, "You're that Panther that can't change that tire." I saw you. I am a bigger celebrity in my whole decade-long career after I was on Inside NASCAR.
That is
I
awesome.
can't change a tire in 15 seconds, and I thought that was pretty awesome.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate you taking the time coming on with us. I mean, those are just some amazing stories.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got some you haven't even told to some of the media before. But yeah, I mean, thank you so much for coming on and spending a few minutes with us.
Yeah. Really
Look, thanks for having me. You guys, you're doing a great job. Keep it up and stay in touch. And Jonathan, tell your family I said hello. I love them.
I will.
And I'll never forget them. And it was very nice to meet you, buddy.
Awesome. Nice to meet you.
It was a
too.
pleasure. Yeah,
Nice
thank you
meeting
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys.
We'll see you
All right,
later.
have a good one. If you guys made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to subscribe if you made it this far. And big thanks again to Pat Terrell. Just an awesome conversation with him. And again, if you guys enjoyed what you saw, subscribe, join us on our journey, and we'll see you guys next time.
See ya. Peace.